I would like to introduce to everyone Anastasiya Stepanova, and she is currently a researcher at the Institute of Biomedical Problems in Russia. And her discussion today will be about the preparation of humans for deep space flights.
Okay, I'm happy to be here as always. So today we'll talk how we can prepare humans to flights to Moon and to the Mars. And we've been studying it at Institute of Biomedical Problems since early 60s. And first very extreme isolation experiment actually happened in 1967. Where 3 test subjects spent 1 year in 12 square meters. This experiment called A Year in Starship. And back then it was proved that actually humans are very adaptive to confined space, and that we can survive psychological pressure, although 3 is not the perfect number for healthy psychological well-being, but why our scientists chose this number, because they didn't want to have the division into groups. But anyway, there was a division into groups. So there was two guys that were together, like that two guys that found much more common, and then there was one guy that was always aside, and this caused even a little bit of physical problems on his health during the constant stress during this 1 year. Another interesting thing is that there was even a love story in this experiment. So outside of the space chamber, there was scientists and doctors, and very often they were communicating through speakers. So one of the test subjects was always hearing a really nice voice of a lady, and he fell in love with her voice. And when he came out after 1 year, they actually got married. So although it was really harsh experiment, but it has a happy ending. And it proved that we can move towards this direction and create new isolation experiments, which will be not as harsh, but still more complex in terms of getting scientific data on how our physiology and psychology reacts to this isolation. So in space, we have several extreme factors for humans. And in IBMP, we consider that isolation and psychological factor is very crucial. After that, we created a new station, much bigger, as you can see here. So it consists of 5 modules, and each module called after the volume which it has. So we have 250 cubic meters, 100, 150, 50, and a hangar that simulates, you can see it here, Martian surface or moon surface. It's up to us which surface we can simulate, maybe even a Titan. For now, Mars 500 experiment that lasted 520 days and simulated flight to Mars and back. Actually, it's still a record-breaking experiment in the duration. It happened back in 2010, and we have here 6 crew members. And also interesting facts that these crew members couldn't ideally communicate with each other because, for example, Chinese crew member, he didn't know Russian and he didn't know English. After a few months, our psychologist saw that actually they communicate quite well and they found their own language. Of course, this experiment was not easy, and there was interesting reactions to isolation. For example, they all lost a lot of weight when they came back. And there was also a food studies, and but even though if they were eating as much as they were eating here back on Earth, they would still lose weight. And maybe this is also caused by a stress that maybe they wouldn't even realize. And another interesting factor is a phenomenon of third quarter. This means that it doesn't matter which duration you have the isolation period. It can be months, or it can be 4 months, or 520 days. Exactly in the middle of this period, you have a rapid change in the mood and kind of like a depression. And our psychologists think that this is because you realize that you already have done so much, but you need to do exactly the same amount of time in this environment and in this isolation. And this can cause also not like a bad mood. And it's interesting to understand, is it good to know this factor before you're going to isolation? Or maybe it's not the best to know it, because you kind of will start to think, okay, at this moment I would start to have a bad temper. But if you don't know this factor, and anyway you have the depression at this period, that's also can be risky, because you will start to doubt yourself and maybe even make it worse, your condition. So I think it's better to know all the theories and different phenomena that happen in isolation in terms of psychological health, and be prepared for them. Mars 500 also proved that we can still have a successful mission. Of course, with I wouldn't say it was ideal. Of course, there was some minor conflicts, and people were not all happy all the time, but we have the same things here on Earth. But nevertheless, no one said that we want to end this mission before the final period when it should be ended. And we consider it a success. And you can see that here, yes, it's a wooden, it's all covered in wood, and it looks like a sauna. But this was made also from psychological support, that our psychologist said that it's most healthy to see wood around you. Of course, we're not going to have it on a real space station or Mars stations, and we need to think which material will be most pleasant for your psychological support, but also in terms of ecological environment. In a hermetic volume, where you have your own atmosphere and pressure, it's important that all materials wouldn't leak any gases that would be not that would be risky for a human. And it means not like in it should be considered during the long period of time. So anything that we bring into our station, we first test in a special oven on a different temperatures and for many, many days, how it's disintegrate the material. And this is a really also very interesting and important direction into the space architecture, and that we need also consider how it will look and from what it will be made, a Mars station. After that, there was several other experiments, but in 2014, we started our major cooperation with NASA, Human Resource Program, and they asked us to have a joint studies and international crew on isolation, but with a different duration. So it was 70 days, then it was 4 months where I took part of, and then actually in November we start 8 months. There will be another crew, and then after that we have 1 year and 1 year. And again, why we are doing it here in Moscow at the station, because it's quite unique. It looks interesting, I know, not modern, not like in a Space Odyssey movie, but it has really complex life support systems, and it has its own atmosphere, air pressure, fully hermetic with control of any gases that you have in your atmosphere. And the only one thing that is not on a spaceship, of course, apart from wood, is that all systems controlled from outside. So we have 24/7 crew that looking after our test subject, and it consists of engineers and doctors. Okay, and I've been talking about this isolation before at Mars Science Convention, and I want to talk about new experiments that we had. For example, we have another extreme factor in space. It's microgravity that causes quite negative effect on our physiology. And back in 70s, when our cosmonauts were flying in a small spaceship for 17 days, and they arrived to Earth, and they couldn't even get out from the spaceship. They were so weak, and they had muscle atrophy and heart problems. Back then, scientists decided to create a model that will help to study the effects of microgravity and which countermeasure we can use. So first there was a dry, wet immersion, and our test subjects basically were inside of the bath in a special suit, but still they were touching water. So this is not the good solution. After that, it was decided to create a dry immersion. And as you can see here, it's a bath covered with waterproof cloth. And then there is a test subject that lays down there for several days. Of course, extreme 56 days were back in Soviet times, but now in modern Russia, we have the longest dry immersion experiment. It was 21 days. But although it's been conducted during 50 years, only last year there was a first dry immersion with female test subject, and they decided to do it short, only 3 days, because they were not sure which how we would react to that. And I would tell you, because I was also a test subject in this experiment, that we've been also a bit worried how we would differ from male test subject. And for us, it was really important experiment to prove that women can fly to space, and that they are as robust and strong as men. And it's interesting is that the first observation that I can share now publicly, that almost all male test subjects during the dry immersion, which was 7 days or 21 days, they had back pain problems. And this back pain started on a second day. And it started on second day, but after 5th day, the pain disappeared. So in our case, all women felt quite good. We had the 6 test subject, and we didn't have any back pain. We had some other difficulties, but it's more connected to our anatomy in terms of going to the toilet, and how to do it in a horizontal position. Also, if you're inside of the water bath, and without any support for your body. So of course, there are more articles to be published soon, I hope, regarding our physiological response to that. But all other negative effects that usually happened with male test subject happened to us also. What does it mean? It means that you lose in the first day a lot of liquid because your body wants to get rid of extra blood pressure. Your spine stretches in 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeters. Your blood system also changes, and you don't feel so well during first few days. And the downside of our experiment, although for some people it seems like, oh, 3 days, it's not so much, but actually in these 3 days, your physiology starts to rapidly and extremely adapting to new environment, and you don't feel really well. And on the 3rd day, that's the moment where your body is already adapting and you would start to feel much better. But with us, on the 3rd day, they were taking us out of the bath, and so we had to readapt to Earth gravity and to a new environment again. So it was very interesting and extreme, but still we had great test subjects, and they all survived it very well. So I heard that in France they will start the dry immersion experiment with also female test subject, maybe yeah, I think in November, and it's interesting which results they would get. And I hope it will be more and more, because we need to study also female physiology, because I can't even imagine that we are going to Mars and staying there and there will be only one gender. That wouldn't fully represent Earth. So I'm hoping we have more and more research on that. And another experiment that we also combine sometimes with dry immersion, but also we can have it separately. It's short radius centrifuge that we also have at IBMP. So in order to have a countermeasures for microgravity, our scientists presented the short radius centrifuge. And there were several research which load we should use and how. And the best way actually to use the longitudinal axis from head to toe, which creates the same effect that we have here on Earth with Earth's gravity connecting to the hydrostatic blood pressure in our body. And our scientists offered this short radius centrifuge to actually be on a space station or on a spaceship that flies to Mars, because it will take 7 to 8 months. And although we have this exercise on ISS, which keep our cosmonauts and astronauts healthy, but this still won't be enough to arrive to Mars and be physically ready to explore the planet, to build something. So we would need still the short radius centrifuge for that. And another really extreme factor that we would have on Mars, it's almost absence of a magnetic field on Mars. And we started also in this year experiment called ARFA, where we decrease the magnetic field in 1,000 times. And you can see it's a special, it looks like a cage. And our test subjects stay there for 8 hours. And for several days, they come, the next day stay again 8 hours. And so here we test cognitive and operation functions and indicators of pain sensitivity. After the research on mice in hypermagnetic environment, scientists said that the low magnetic field affects cognitive functions and also the fertility. And of course, we don't want our astronauts on Mars to become dumb and to lose it. So here we're trying to study this effect, but so far the results that there was no effect. And I think it's because of the duration. 8 hours, of course, it's not much. And it's interesting how we can find a solution to prolong this period, and who would agree to that, who would be the volunteers, because it's quite risky. But we'll see. And yes, here you can see more about this equipment that we use. Of course, inside of the case, you cannot use any electrical device. And our test subject told us that it's very, the hardest thing is just to stay there for 8 hours without using means of communication, but they are playing chess and reading books. So here I covered 3 main extreme factors that humans can face and will face during long space flight. And I'm happy to answer questions, but consider that I'm not, I don't have medical background. I'm just a test subject, but so consider questions not very medical or scientific. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anastasiya. I'll ask you a couple of questions. My name is Lara. I'll ask a couple of questions on behalf of the audience. Let's see. Well, one of the first questions that we've had, it was more of a comment, but it would be interesting to hear your opinion and maybe some insights that you know about this gender dynamics. So on the picture of the Mars 500 project, the person Nina, they did not see any women on the picture, but then you've talked a little bit more about the female test subjects. So it's just interesting to hear on your opinion of what is the trajectory of what is the future of gender balance in those space programs.
Yes, it's getting better. And with a project that we are doing with NASA, project named the Sirius. So in this project, we need to have 3 crew members, which are female, and 3 are male. This is the #1 rule. And it's also interesting to for our psychologists to study the group dynamics, how it changes from, for example, Mars 500, where we had only male test subject. And on the recent analysis, they said that actually women, they balanced men. And if in the beginning of isolation, there was quite a difference in approaching the problems and solving them, or interaction with the mission support, after several months, it was all mixed. And at the end, the group dynamic was very similar. There was no difference between female and male reaction, which is very interesting.
Wonderful, thank you. And we have one question from the Outspace VR.
Okay.
Let's see, I'm not, Well, as they're setting up, I'll ask you one more question. So I think we've got a couple about just the immediate environment in those isolation experiments, and people are asking whether indoor plants or artwork or pets could be ever allowed in those spaces. And if yes, then what kind of effect do you think that would have on the test subjects?
Yes, we had a greenhouse, and it had amazing effect in terms of the visuals and smells. So because when you stay in this confined environment, you have limited colors that you see, and texture, and also the smell. But with the greenhouse, when you have new plants growing, and this creates really positive psychological aspect. In terms of pictures or paintings, that's also very positive. And for this 8 months duration, we added space pictures that took our cosmonaut Ryazanski, and our crew members that are training now for this, they said that it's really motivates them and actually creates the atmosphere that they're really on the space station.
Wonderful, thank you. James, do you know if folks at the VR are ready to ask the question?
It looks like they are.
Yeah, are you able to hear us okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Anastasia. I was wondering if you could tell us, there was a slide in your presentation that seemed to show VR headsets, maybe. Could you tell us a little bit about what's being simulated there and how you're using that?
Yes, so since we have this hangar which simulates Mars or Moon surface, it's limited in space, and with a serious project, we decided to combine it with VR, and therefore our crew members could actually expand their view on the moon. And we had the simple VR system in 4 months experiment, but for the 8 months we have quite advanced system which even creates the feeling that of 6G, no, not 6G, I mean the less 6 times less gravity that you have on moon. So it created with the special devices on which our astronauts or cosmonauts hanged in and using the VR. Also, there is special surface that they're walking on, and but basically they're standing at one point. They're just walking on this very slippery surface. And it also creates that they're going long distance on the moon. And we also will use rovers. So it's interesting how it all will soon work out.
Great, thank you.
Oh, and also VR for psychological support. It's we will do also tests on that using VR goggles. But for now, it's just the videos of nature. And of course, in the future, it will be perfect if you have videos of your family and loved ones. But maybe it will be good, or maybe it will be bad, because you would start to miss them even more and would be quite sad and depressed. So here it's interesting point whether we should use it or not.
Awesome, thank you so much.
I guess we're running out of time. There's a lot of really great questions, both on the technical side and on the very interesting speculative side. So, I mean, if time permits, I'd like to ask maybe one more question about the future of language. There's this question from Majda, and they're asking, as you have mentioned about the case of some language communication barrier, that didn't result in stopping the communication quality between astronauts, which is extremely impressive. So, Majda is curious to know if during these humans' deep space flights, the results could be a creation of new languages in purpose to communicate effectively. And again, it's more, I think, of just a speculative scenario.
Well, as you know, on ISS, they already have this Runglish or Ingrush, how you call it. So it's a mix of Russian and English, and they happily use it. So I think, yes, for sure, there will be a new space language, maybe that combines several languages here from Earth.
Thank you
We
very
can take
much.
one more, Lyra.
Oh, wonderful. Let's see what we got here. The last question here is, how will you create the team according to the personality match, according to military structure, like hierarchical or something else?
It's a good question, and it depends on our commander. So for different isolation experiments, there were different types of commander. Someone with a military background, so he had this hierarchy in his crew, and some are with different approach, so that each crew member should give its opinion, and then we decide what we should do and how we could solve it. When we choose crew members, we firstly, of course, look at health because our selection is very strict, is the same as for cosmonaut selection. And we don't want to have any health problems during the long isolation period. And then, of course, we consider the psychological health, and we put together 12 people, like a main crew and backup. But at that point, 3 months before the start of the experiment, we're not sure which ones will be exactly in the main crew. And so we look at the dynamic and how they work together and train. And then we decide who will go.
Thank you.
Anastasia, thank you for being with us. I love listening to your presentations. We were delighted, and I hope I get to see you in person next year.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much. Amazing
Thank you.
convention.
Thanks so much.